Have you ever felt that chill on the back of your neck when you're alone at night? That spine-tingling sensation for no apparent reason? What if I told you that fear isn't out there, but lives inside your own mind, waiting for the right moment to completely dominate you? What you're about to discover will forever change the way you see your own thoughts. There's a hidden place in your brain where all your fears meet. A dark territory you've never consciously explored, but one that controls your reactions, your choices, and even your nightmares. Right now, as you read these words, that place is active, processing threats, creating terrible scenarios, and preparing you for dangers that may never happen. Science has finally discovered where fear lives, and what they found was more disturbing than any horror movie could imagine. In the center of your brain, hidden like a tiny almond among billions of neurons, there's a structure called the amygdala. It's about the size of a grape, but its power over you is absolute. This small brain region is fear's headquarters, the place where every frightening experience you've ever lived through has been filed, cataloged, and stored as an emergency file ready to be accessed in milliseconds. When you see a strange shadow in the dark hallway of your house, when you hear an unexplainable noise in the middle of the night, when you feel that tightness in your chest before an important presentation, it's your amygdala taking control of your body and mind. But here's what nobody tells you: your amygdala can't differentiate between real danger and imaginary danger. To it, watching a horror movie, imagining a robbery, or remembering a past trauma has exactly the same effect as living that situation in that instant. Your heart races, your hands sweat, your breathing gets short, and your muscles prepare to fight or flee. All of this because of something that exists only in your head. You're being hijacked by your own brain, and you don't even realize it. The journey we'll take together now will lead you through the darkest corners of the human mind. You'll discover why some people develop paralyzing phobias while others face mortal dangers without flinching. You'll understand how traumatic memories get stuck in infinite loops, making you relive the same horror repeatedly. And most importantly, you'll learn how your own thoughts can become your worst enemies, creating fears that never existed and destroying your inner peace piece by piece. Think about the last time you had a really scary nightmare. You woke up sweating, heart racing, feeling like you just escaped death, right? But none of it was real. It was just your mind creating completely fictional images, sounds, and sensations. Even so, your body reacted as if every second of that terror were true. This happens because your amygdala was working double shifts during your sleep, processing old fears, creating new threat scenarios, and training you for danger situations that may never occur. The first problem begins when you were just a child. Your amygdala was already completely formed and functioning when you were only a few months old, long before you developed the ability to think rationally or control your emotions. Every time you cried in fear in the dark, every time you got startled by a loud noise, every time you saw an adult's angry face, your amygdala was recording all of this as if they were survival warnings. And here's the scary part: these fear memories were filed without context, without explanation, without the ability to be rationalized. They simply exist in your brain as absolute truths, waiting to be triggered by any cue that remotely resembles that original experience. Imagine that at 4 years old you were chased by a large, aggressive dog. You don't consciously remember this, but your amygdala remembers every detail perfectly: the loud barking, the size of the animal, the paralyzing fear you felt. Now, 30 years later, you feel inexplicable anxiety every time you pass by a dog, even if it's small and docile. You don't understand where this irrational fear comes from, but it controls your actions anyway. Your brain is protecting you from a threat that no longer exists, using a memory you don't even know you have. The second problem is even more sinister. Your amygdala doesn't just store fears from the past, it also creates new fears based on future possibilities. Have you ever stayed awake at night imagining all the terrible things that could happen tomorrow, next week, next year? Every catastrophic scenario your mind creates is being processed by your amygdala as if it were a real threat happening at that moment. And the more you think about it, the stronger that fear memory becomes, until it transforms into chronic anxiety, constant panic, a mental prison from which you can't escape. Modern society has turned your amygdala into an enemy. Our ancestors used this brain structure to survive predators, identify poisonous plants, and avoid hostile tribes. Fear was useful because threats were real and immediate. But today, you live in a world where threats are abstract, constant, and impossible to completely avoid. News of crimes, natural disasters, economic crises, pandemics, and wars are dumped into your mind every day through bright screens. Your amygdala hasn't evolved to handle this. It treats every news headline, every shocking video on social media, every horror story you hear as if it were a direct danger to your survival. You're living in a permanent state of alert, and your body is paying the price. Let's talk about Emma, a 32-year-old woman who was living a completely normal life until something inexplicable happened. She started having panic attacks out of nowhere, in the middle of the street, at work, even at home sitting on the couch. Her heart would race, she couldn't breathe, she felt like she was going to die at any moment. Doctors couldn't find anything physically wrong with her. It was only when she underwent a functional MRI of her brain that they discovered the truth. Her amygdala was hyperactive, constantly firing fear signals for no apparent reason. But there was a reason. Years ago, Emma had been mugged in an empty parking lot. She thought she'd overcome the trauma, but her amygdala never forgot. Every time she entered a place with few people, every time she saw a shadow moving quickly, every time she heard footsteps behind her, the memory of that terror came back and took control of her body. The climax of this story happens when neuroscientists made a discovery that changed everything. They managed to identify that fear memories aren't permanent. Every time you remember something scary, that memory is temporarily undone and rebuilt in your brain. During that brief moment, it becomes vulnerable and can be modified or even erased. This means you're not condemned to live with your fears forever. There's a window of opportunity each time you face what scares you, a chance to rewrite the story your amygdala tells you. But here's the mortal danger you need to understand: if you avoid your fears, if you run from what terrifies you, you're reinforcing the fear memory. Your amygdala interprets your escape as confirmation that the threat was real. Every time you say no to an opportunity because of anxiety, every time you cancel social plans because you're afraid of being judged, every time you're paralyzed thinking about all the bad things that could happen, you're feeding the monster that lives inside your mind. It grows stronger, more dominant, until eventually you don't recognize who you are anymore. You become your fears. The message that needs to be engraved in your soul is this: fear isn't weakness, but allowing it to control your life is a choice. Your amygdala is just trying to protect you, using the only resources it has. It's not evil, it's not trying to destroy you. But it also doesn't know that you no longer need to run from saber-toothed tigers or hide from nocturnal predators. You need to teach your brain that you're safe, and the only way to do that is by facing your fears gradually, in a controlled and conscious way. There are proven techniques that can help you reprogram your amygdala. Gradual exposure works by presenting increasingly less scary versions of what terrifies you, until your brain learns there's no real danger. Cognitive behavioral therapy teaches you to identify distorted thoughts and replace them with more realistic interpretations. Mindfulness meditation trains you to observe your fears without reacting to them, creating a space between the stimulus and your automatic response. And in extreme cases, there are even medications that can temporarily decrease amygdala activity, giving you a chance to breathe and rebuild your relationship with fear. But the deeper truth is that you'll never completely eliminate fear from your life. It's part of who you are as a human being. The question isn't to live without fear, but to learn to live with it without letting it be the pilot of your existence. You need to understand that that voice in your head telling you to give up, to hide, not to try, is just your amygdala doing its job. You don't have to obey. You can thank it for trying to protect you and then make the courageous choice anyway. Think about how many incredible opportunities you've already lost because of fear. How many conversations you didn't start, how many risks you didn't take, how many dreams you abandoned before even trying. Each of those decisions was influenced by that small structure in the center of your brain that's convinced the world is more dangerous than it really is. But what if you could go back in time knowing what you know now? How many things would you do differently? The good news is you don't need a time machine. You can start changing your relationship with fear today. Identify one thing you've been avoiding because of anxiety. It doesn't have to be something huge, it can be something small like asking a question in public or trying a new food. Now commit to facing it in the next few days, no matter how uncomfortable it is. When you do this, pay attention to what happens. You'll probably feel the anxiety rising, your body will want to flee, but if you stay there and go through the experience, something magical happens. The anxiety reaches a peak and then starts to decrease. Your brain realizes you survived, that there was no real danger, and the fear memory associated with that situation gets a little weaker. The place where fear lives inside your mind doesn't have to be a prison. It can be a museum where you visit occasionally to remember where you came from, but it's no longer where you live. You have the power to decide how much space fear occupies in your life. The amygdala will continue doing its job, but you don't have to let it make all the decisions. If you've made it this far on this journey, you've already demonstrated more courage than you imagine. Because facing the truth about fear, understanding how it works, and recognizing its power over you is already the first step to freeing yourself from it. Now tell me in the comments, what's the fear that has most prevented you from living fully? Share your story, because by putting your fear into words, you're beginning the process of taking it out of the shadows and bringing it into the light, where it loses its power.